Catapulting Commissions family, welcome back. Incredibly excited to have you this week. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest, and then I'm going to tell you why I'm excited to have this conversation. Kate DIxon is the creator of Pay Up, Unlocking the Secrets of Salary Negotiation, the True Leadership Workshop, True You, Creating Your Personal Brand, and Your Best Year Yet, Action, Reflection, Achievement. Now, Kate helps diverse leaders around the world becoming both more successful and more fulfilled through coaching, in-person workshops, masterminds, and online courses where she teaches breakthrough strategies and techniques to accelerate leadership results. Kate has spent the past 25 years working for and consulting with leaders for profit companies, including Nike, Intel, American Express, Opal, Quantum, Air Liquide, Kaiser Permanente, and Macari, as well as nonprofits like DePaul Industries, Period, the Learning Policy Institute, and the Nike Community Impact Fund. She's a certified coach and has been a certified compensation professional for over 20 years. Kate speaks for groups and gives podcast interviews on topics including salary negotiations, discovering your principles, authentic leadership, time management, leadership coaching, life planning, and gratitude. Kate provides advice about leadership, pay, culture, and organizations to the subscribers who work with her at katedixon.org. Now, Catapulting Commissions family. The whole premise of the show, the whole premise of the brand is designed to teach you, the sales professional, sales leader, sales entrepreneur, how to generate higher income, how to make more commissions. Well, if you're in a position where a salary is part of your compensation, that's a start. If you're a sales leader or a sales executive and you're managing a team or you have responsibilities for creating a compensation plan, you have the direct ability to increase those commissions, but that goes with a whole boatload of other things, including retention, development, etc. So I am extremely excited to discuss everything with compensation. Catapulting Commissions family, let's welcome Kate DIxon to the Catapulting Commissions show. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here.
Well, first of all, Kate, thank you for taking the time to spend some time with us. Now, this show might be one of my most downloaded shows because everyone listening loves making money, right? There's not a doubt about it. But I also have a group of my audience that is sales leaders, sales executives, people who are in positions of management and creating things. Let's just set the platform straight for the entire audience. When it comes to developing or creating a compensation plan for sales professionals, what goes into that?
Well, there's a ton that goes into it. So, when we as compensation professionals look at sales plans, we're looking at, how much do we need to sell as a company? What level of revenue are we willing to share with our sales reps? And, a ton of stuff. And we look at territories, we look at individuals, we look at, the leadership, all of that kind of stuff comes together. But basically most commission plans or sales plans have, a few things in common. So there's the mix. So how much base pay versus how much commission. So that's one of the things that we talk about. And, the mix depends on the type of sale. So if it's like a commodity kind of an issue, short sales cycle, it tends to be higher commission. And if it's a longer sales cycle, relationship based, stuff like that, we tend to see a lower mix. So that might be more like an 80-20 or a 70-30 versus, a 60-40 or even straight commission for these shorter time cycles. So the mix, then we have kind of the design of the plan itself. We've got all these other things that come into play. What do you want to start on first?
So let's talk a little bit here on that base pay versus commission. So we talked about the long cycle versus the short cycle. Now, one of the things that sales leaders get challenged with, right, is that ideal mix. Like everybody wants to have ideally, right, full transparency. If I'm negotiating, I want the highest base salary and I want the highest commission structure possible. Now, that's not always the case. If we're in these long sales cycle where let's talk complex sales, medical sales, enterprise sales, software sales, where that relationship is of value. What is the ideal percentage mix? Is there a metric that is, hey, this is the amount of salary, this is the amount of variable comp, and how do you account for that variable comp?
Well, I think everything is, custom to an organization. What I've seen work really well in these kinds of sales has been more of that 80-20 mix. But, again, it really can depend how much impact will the salesperson have on the sale itself, right? I've worked for companies that have commission plans, but the product really sells itself. It's really about, controlling the supply to each vendor and stuff. But in these really big complex sales, you need to make sure that the base level is high enough that people can still live on it, but also have that significant recognition of something that brings a ton of revenue to the organization. So, again, it depends, but, kind of the 70-30 would probably be the lowest base that I would imagine would be really effective in that kind of thing, knowing that you have to have, it'll take sometimes a year or maybe even 2 years to realize the sale from this relationship that you're creating.
Now, when you're saying 70-30 or 80-20, are you referencing total compensation? So simple math. If total compensation is 100 grand, salary 70,000, variable comp 30, or salary is 80, variable comp 20. That's how. Right. That's what you're referencing. So
yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So and like that 30 or the 20%, that is the target. That doesn't mean you're limited to that. And most sales plans have, excellence pay that would be, twice that or 3 times that, depending on how the plan's designed. Yeah.
So what is the objective of that base pay, right? I know you mentioned earlier that base pay is designed to, cover the necessities of life, but in designing these comp plans, how much thought goes to that base pay for retention, and how much thought in that base pay goes to, let's say, a cost of living adjustment, right? The person that lives in Bismarck, North Dakota or Wichita, Kansas, doesn't have the same cost of expenses as the person in San Francisco, New York City, Seattle, etc. So what's the objective and how much thought's put into developing those base pays?
Well, I think that it really depends on, again, on the type of sale and stuff like that, but, and whether or not the sales rep has control over where they live. Because some people can live wherever they want and do their sales from Wichita or from LA, right? And those are very different cost of labor markets. And I think, the one thing that I would say is that it's important to know the difference between cost of living and cost of labor. They're different. And when we think about designing compensation plans, we're really looking at the cost of labor. That means how much does it cost to hire somebody in that area, right? And that could be different than the cost of living. So I love to use San Francisco and New York as kind of examples. They're super duper high cost of living areas. And they also do have higher cost of labor, but it's not really enough to offset the entire cost of living, right? And to compare some West Coast cities that San Diego and Portland, Oregon, they have a cost of labor that's pretty much the same. It's about 106% of the national average. But it costs a ton more to live in San Diego than it does in Portland. So, you have to be thinking about all of that kind of stuff, and your comp people are thinking about this as well. But in terms of how it relates to the commission itself, again, the way that I've done it in the past is that the mix is really based on kind of a national average kind of a thing, but there might be offsets like cost of labor adjustments or a geographic differential that would be applied to people who are in cost of labor areas that are much higher, right?
So in identifying that cost of living, cost of labor, and accounting for that base pay, right? I feel, or I believe in, and this is my experience. I've worked for sales companies that have these large variable comps, right? They're very attractive, right? I mean, it's to a point of saying I can come and attract you for a $80,000 salary, but I have $200,000 in variable comp, versus the company that has $120,000 salary but only $30,000 in variable comp. And I use these numbers because these are some of the numbers that that people who work with me, people who listen to the show, I have a mix of people who are highly compensated, but a lot of it's driven from that variable comp.
Yeah.
Is that variable comp driven off of forecasted growth numbers? Is that variable comp driven off of P&L? Is there, when you're designing these compensations, and we're talking from the company standpoint, is there a budget you're saying we can't go over this, or is there a budget and then a little gray area above?
So I've typically worked really closely with the head of sales and the finance folks to design these things. So for instance, I had a sales plan one time that people were really frustrated because the company was losing money. And it was a very small margin business. So super transactional, super commodity, needed high volumes to produce money. And the sales plan was based solely on volume and had nothing to do with profitability. And so, the sales reps are like, okay, volume, I can do volume. I'm just going to cut the cost. Well, then every sale was costing the company money. So, so again, in order to drive the right behaviors in the sales reps and to drive the right outcomes from a revenue and profit perspective, that partnership just has to exist really well, because you can forecast, okay, if this is the total revenue that we're going to get, what doesn't make sense for paying in commission, and we look at a number of different performance levels. So I'm sure you're familiar with like the threshold target excellence concept, and when we do this, we model things based on 95% of people are going to hit that threshold level. So they're going to make at least that amount. And when a threshold means basically that you're not going to get paid any commission unless you make that threshold number, right? So we're going to project that 95% of the people are going to make that. Then we look at target, which is basically what we think people are going to make. It's a little bit of a stretch goal, but we expect between 60 and 80% of people to actually meet their targets. And then there's that excellence level that is, kind of where your superstars live. We expect to see about 10% of people kind of overshoot their target level and get, maybe 150% or 200% of their target. We want to be looking at about 10%. If we have a little bit more, that's great too. But we look at what is the profitability to the company at each of those levels, expecting a performance spread in the entire sales group, of that 95, 60, 70, 10% kind of thing. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. So in this threshold target excellence discussion, is the argument for threshold, and I know I've had this discussion with sales professionals that say, hey, I manage a territory that generates $1 million, right? My name's associated to this territory. It does $1 million because I'm here. In compensation, are those funds allocated through a salary? Are those funds allocated through the variable comp, saying, 95% of the people are going to hit this threshold, whatever the threshold may be. Let's say it's to do the same revenue you did in the previous year, to do 80% of the revenue, whatever that number is. Is that compensation pulled from the salary, or is that part of that variable comp discussion?
Well, it's, you can't really have one without the other, right? Because, the base salary goes into cost of sales, right? So, but there's no commission that you're paying if somebody doesn't reach threshold. So you can kind of assume that about 5% of your reps won't hit the threshold. So they won't even get any commission. They're just going to be resting on their base pay, which can be very, very uncomfortable for people. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was looking for, because there is that group, that 5% that doesn't hit threshold. There is a group of sales professionals, and being in position of sales leadership, I've been in that role where, hey, this person may not be working out anymore. They're not hitting their metrics. They're not motivated. The time for them to work with this company is coming to a conclusion. So usually missing that metric or missing that threshold helps that process. They typically say, I'm going to leave because I can't make money here. And sometimes it's a mutual benefit to both parties involved. So that does answer the question. But let's jump on the opposite side of that spectrum.
Yeah.
In that
I love the opposite side.
We all do. Catapulting Commissions, we live in the opposite side. So when I'm planning or creating a comp plan, one of the things that, and this is, this really is a question that I don't have an answer to, and I've always wondered myself. When we're forecasting that compensation for that area of excellence, are we saying, hey, there's going to be a 10%, 5%, 15%, whatever, of those of you that work in the sales force that are going to blow out your number? You make it very challenging and difficult to predict a true budget for compensation. No matter how much we give you a wiggle room, you are going to have top performers that just seem to explode, right? That's what sales is, right? We want those people.
Yes.
Do we account for that money on the sales they generate? Is that just saying, hey, okay, so it's like it's a free for all, essentially?
Well, so different companies do things differently, but most companies have some sort of a cap on how much commission you can make from an individual sale and or in commissions in general. That's what I've seen most of the time. Some don't, and it's totally okay. But what we have to look at is the cost of cost per sale is going to go up if we put an accelerator up. If you make 110% or 120%. Sometimes people put accelerators on there because we really want you to get to that next level. But the way that we work it is to make sure that it's not going to, that next level sale isn't going to cost the company money, right? So it's all about, we're sharing, the company's sharing more of the sale with the rep who's blowing out their numbers. And that totally makes sense to me. So yeah, and that's all figured out. It's, we look at what it would look like, for the whole group. What would happen if everybody blew out their numbers? And, we do scenario planning. What would that look like? What would that do to our cost of sales? All that kind of jazz. So it's very deliberate. We don't expect everybody to make blowouts, but, there is one thing that we do plan for as well, is we look at, we call them windfalls and waterfalls, right? And so sometimes, there's going to be something that's outside of the sales rep's control that gives them a gigantic sale that is amazing that they didn't really have anything to do with, right? So typically what we write in the sales plan is, hey, if there's something that that comes into your territory that normally you would get credit for, but it's really the CEO that made the sale or something like that. There's usually some sort of a, hey, we're gonna reserve the right to dial that back a little bit, if that's a windfall that you really didn't have anything to do with. On the same time, at the same time, there's usually some sort of a waterfall provision. So if something happens, like, oh, a worldwide pandemic that is outside of your control, that would really impact your ability to sell, because you can't, like, for salons can't be open for 3 months, and that's going to have a major impact on their sales. There'll be some sort of a way for the leadership to dial that up a little bit, to really take into consideration those kinds of things.
I like that. The windfall, the waterfall. I have been on both sides where I've had deals that have fallen in my lap where it feels great. You get paid well. You're like, this is awesome. But at the same time, I know I truly didn't generate it. And the waterfall, we've experienced a few of them, right? We're going through one right now. I know there's plenty of sales professionals that are not making the money they made 4 months ago, that are concerned, will I make this money again in the future? Let's switch gears here a little bit in this compensation planning, right? If I'm planning a compensation for a sales force, how much time do your clients spend deciding or comparing, let's like utilizing compensation for retention? Sales professionals are turning over at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments is they're turning over because they want to make more money. I'm not making the money I used to make. I can make more money at working at XYZ company. How much time and what research is done when creating compensation plans to say, hey, I want to retain my sales force, and I don't want my competitor to steal my top performers?
Yeah.
What does that look like in the planning process?
So, again, I mentioned that partnership between, sales leadership and finance and, somebody like me, that has to be part of the conversation, because if, one of your best tools, which is your commission plan, isn't performing the way you need it to, or it's rewarding the wrong behaviors, or, whatever you're seeing. I mean, you're the one who's closest to what's actually happening. And, we in compensation will, we'll run you some S curves and show you what's happening and hold up the mirror and go, hey, this is how it's working, across the company and stuff like that. But we don't really know, like, is the plan that we put together, is that having some unintended consequences? And so that's where we really need our sales leaders to, bring those things to our attention, because, it's not good for the company to have your best salespeople go over to your biggest competitor, right?
Yeah, it's one of those challenges that sales is a high income skill. The ability to sell and drive revenue, no matter what industry, no matter what pandemic, we always need someone to drive and influence that decision-making process, and people are going to get paid for it. So that challenge does exist. I know I have personally recruited people from a competitive company or from a company that's in the same industry. Maybe you're not my direct competitor, but I've met you. I like you. I think you do well. I'm going to go recruit you, and I'm going to use my compensation plan as like that carrot to draw in. But retaining salespeople in compensation plans in 2020, we don't see things anymore like pension plans. We don't see some of these long-term wealth building tools. They used to exist, but more and more they're starting to become on that chopping block, where they're starting to be dressed in different methods of total compensation. What are those areas of total compensation for a sales force that's outside that realm of salary, commission? What does long-term compensation tools look like for a company?
Well, and I think it depends on the company, but there are definitely long-term incentives that can be allocated to the sales group, just like they are for other folks. And long-term incentives typically look like some sort of stock plan or equity plan. So RSUs, restricted stock units, or stock options. Those are long-term incentives that are meant to provide a retentive effect, right? Because you don't realize the full value of them for usually around 4 years, right? So those have been tools that we've used really successfully, especially in growth companies, to retain great talent. And I don't think sales folks should be exempt from that.
I completely agree. And I do know those retention tools. I've been with companies that have had phenomenal retention tools that have some stake in the game, right? The retention tool is significant. If I get a stock today and the stock price 7 years from now, 5 years from now, 4 years from now has tripled, quadrupled, my 10,000, 20,000, whatever number bonus I received 4 years ago is now worth 80. So those retention tools do work. Are more companies utilizing that stock retention? And is there companies, or are companies still evaluating, is a pension, let's just put it out there, is pension a thing of the past? Do new companies still offer a pension, or is it more stock driven?
You know, it's not really the stock that comes into play. It's really the 401k, right? So retirement plans are not dead. Pension plans are, unfortunately. So the technical term is defined contribution versus defined benefit. A pension plan is a defined benefit, so you know what kind of benefit you're going to get at the end of it. 401k is a defined contribution, which means you know how much you're putting in, and you can allocate it typically to different investment funds and stuff like that correspond to the risk that you're wanting to take and the length that will be, length of time it'll be before you retire and stuff like that. 401ks are pretty common. Almost everybody has them. Even for nonprofits, they have their own version of these. That is, I think, the way that retirement's going to work. I also love it, and I try to design this in when I'm designing comp programs, is I love profit sharing plans, because I think those can be really effective with helping people identify with the company at large and how their behavior affects that. It's not as much of an issue with salespeople, frankly, because they know what's after them, But I love that as an additional tool, additional lever. And a lot of the larger companies do it. It's, again, not huge. Most of them are, 3 to 5%, but adding that additional amount to, the 401k that you're already saving can be pretty nice.
Is profit sharing more effective in smaller startup companies as opposed to some of these large conglomerates that have 30,000, 50,000, 80,000 employees? Is it more attractive smaller? Is it more attractive larger? What is, do you have a preference, or is it just it's a tool we utilize when appropriate?
Well, I think it is a tool we use when it's appropriate, but I think that it's because the revenue tends to be a little bit more stable at larger companies, it tends to be something that people can count on from year to year. Whereas some of the smaller companies, it's like, oh, yay, we made a profit. Oh, we didn't quite make a profit this year. So if you have really revenue that goes all over the place, then it can be a little bit more of a challenge.
Fair enough. Last question here before I switch gears on you completely. What are the mistakes? Right? What are the top 1-2 mistakes that companies make when crafting and creating compensation plans to attract and retain sales professionals?
I think the number one is the thing that we were talking about earlier. If you don't have a really great partnership with your HR people and your sales leadership and your finance folks, it's doomed. You can't create something that meets the needs of your sales force without including all three of these groups. I think another thing is that sometimes people don't do a great job of really understanding the unintended consequences of a plan that they design. So that is one thing that I think, your sales leadership can help you spot things that might not be obvious, but really making sure that they're not unintended consequences like that story I was telling you about. Every sale costs the company money. I think that those are the two things, that partnership and really nailing down your unintended consequences.
I like what you said there. Those that partnership is key, but those unintended consequences, if you're a sales leader, if you're a manager, if you're an executive, a VP, it is your job to say, hey, here's some of the consequences with this comp plan. And sometimes they're not intentional, but the impact is so detrimental to the company that if you don't speak up, you're not doing your company, you're not doing your team, you are not doing your job. Essentially, your job is to bring areas that are going to cause problems down the road. So I really appreciate you sharing that insight, Kate. Now, let's switch gears here a little bit. So we just spent some time discussing sales compensation for companies from a company standpoint, how to set up a comp plan, what we're looking to accomplish, the objectives, etc. But let's switch gears here. You also help coach and consult professionals who are looking to negotiate their personal salary, their overall compensation.
Yep.
Let's talk sales professionals. What does that first step look like to negotiate? I got a job which XYZ company is offering me a salary and a variable comp. I'm not really content with the salary. I'm not content with the variable comp. How do we start those discussions? What do those discussions look like? Are the days of just firing off saying, hey, I'd offer you 60 grand. I'm not going to take this job for a salary less than 70 or less than 80. Are those days still relevant, or is there a new strategy, a new tactic?
Well, I would, with my clients, I always kind of back things up quite a bit. So the first thing that you need to do when you're negotiating your salary is to be really clear about what it is that you want. So not everybody and not every sales rep is going to want the same thing. Some people are really, they want to, maximize their income, and that's the thing that matters. They want the, no caps. They want to be able to really blow out their commissions. That's the most important to them. Some other folks may want to really have a good balance between a nice, rich comp package and not working 1,000 hours a day, right? So, vacation can be important to people. Working with particular types of clients may be a big driver for them. But get clear. That's the number one thing. Get clear on what it is that you want from your relationship with your employer. And it doesn't have to all be about pay stuff, but you're going to want to, kind of get clear about what you want from a pay perspective as well. And I always encourage people to kind of have a minimum viable offer concept in their head, right? So in order for me to make a move or to accept this first job, I really need to know what it is that is my floor, that I just will not take the job without. And this is something, those two things are really so important that I really recommend people do them before they even start looking for a job or as they're starting their job search. So, getting clear about what you want and getting clear about what the minimum acceptable is, those are two really important things.
Yeah, I definitely think that clarity in what I want, what does my life look like? We talk compensation, but I also know that I consistently tell sales professionals, you can have all the compensation in the world, but if the quality of life that you're living isn't matching your expectations, you could pay someone $500,000 a year to sell pencils, but if they have to be on the road 365 days, they may not have a quality of life that they want. Yeah. So I think clarity is key. And then the minimum offer, it's funny because I've been on both sides of the salary negotiation. I've had a minimum offer in my mind, and I'm trying to extract the most above it. And I've also been on the other side of the offer table where I've offered a job and I know I have a ceiling, and I'm trying to make that match in that middle.
Yeah.
When you're crafting your minimum offer to your clients, is there research in that market? Are you trying to get competitive with what that market industry, maybe pharmaceutical reps have a certain income, medical device reps have a certain income, software reps, enterprise sales, entry level sales, they all have different metrics. So how much research and how does someone research what is a valid offer? Because I feel the one thing that has happened to me is I've offered a candidate a job and she counter offered with a very large, demanding counter offer, so much so that it put me off for a second, where I was like, two things: you haven't done your research as well as I thought you had, and now I'm not sure if I want to hire you, but I just extended a verbal offer. So there was this moment of doubt. So how do people research what is a viable, respectable salary to offer a sales professional, or total compensation?
Well, so if you're inside a company, and you're a sales leader, your compensation professionals can be great partners for this. And you can make sure that, if you sit down with them and say, hey, look, these are the companies that we're recruiting from, these are the people we're losing people to, this is the type of sale that happens. I want to make sure that we've got things set straight from a market perspective. That's great, because they'll have great data for you to look at. If you're a candidate, on the other hand, the good news for you is that people are talking a lot more about pay than they used to. So you can, there are tons of online sources that you can go to kind of get a sense. There are, forums for sales people that you can go on, and people will talk about what's normal and things like that. Talk to your friends, and if you don't feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm really targeting 90 base pay and 40 commission target, does that sound right? You can give them a range. Say, hey, my research is showing that jobs like this are paid between 80 and 100 in base, and then 30 to 40% commission target on top of that. Does that range sound normal to you? And chances are really good that they'll be like, oh, that's awesome, or wow, that's really kind of low for what I've experienced, or oh my gosh, you're super high. So I think having those conversations, doing your online research is really important. And you may be in a position where you're really at the top of your game, and it doesn't matter what they offer you. You know what you need to get, and if they're not in the same range as you, it's not a match. And a lot of times this will happen because it's not about how valuable you are as a person. It's about how the company values that role. And there's not a whole lot you can do to influence how the company views the role. And if it's not matching up, if you're really far apart, that's a concern, and it's okay. It's okay that it's not a match, and you want to find that out earlier rather than later.
Absolutely. I think the earlier the better. And in negotiation, clarity's everything, right? You want to be really clear. You want to have transparency if you're on the other side of the negotiating table. So I definitely think having this discussion earlier is better than later. Now, in the world of salary negotiation, there's two types. In my experience, there's two types of salary negotiations. One, if I offer a job to someone, there's that salary negotiation. Two, we have someone who's been with the company, who's performed consistently, has hit quota year in, year out, and all of a sudden, I don't want to say all of a sudden, but now they're facing a dilemma where, hey, I should be making more money. So let's discuss the first one, then we'll dive in the second one. When is it appropriate, specifically appropriate in the recruiting interviewing process, to bring up that salary expectations? Do you start your interview off by, the whole recruiting process? Hey, I'm not interested in the job unless I can make this, or you go all the way through the process and at the end you spring, hey, well, I'll take this job only if I can make this amount. When is the appropriate time?
That's such a great question. So there are a couple of things that I would say. I work with a lot of executive recruiters and internal recruiters and do, talks with them as well. And my understanding from them is they try to nail that kind of in the ballpark conversation pretty early in the interview process, because it doesn't make sense if you're not in the ballpark to waste everybody's time and get to the end and go, oh wow, it's like a complete disconnect. That's not okay. Now, what's interesting is in California, in Oregon, and a lot of states, it's not legal to ask people what what their historical pay has been, right? So it's just you can't ask that. What leaders can ask, or HR people, recruiters can ask, is what are your salary expectations? And I would expect that to come up, again, maybe not in the first time that you talk, but probably in the second. The first one is, hey, is this person even, going to match our needs? Once that's figured out, then you typically will get that question. So, you got to be prepared to either state upfront what you want, or if you don't feel comfortable, say something like, hey, without knowing more about the total rewards package and the incentive plan, it's really hard for me to target, but if you can kind of let me know the broad brushes, I can let you know if we're in the same ballpark or not. And I think that's totally okay to say that, and recruiters are going to be fine with that. And I think too that having that conversation is powerful up front, and it's also something you can come back to if things aren't really the way that you thought they were, if this is really a bigger job, and they offered you 90 and it's, when you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a much bigger job than we were talking about. You can revisit it. Now, based on what I know, my market research says that jobs like this are paid between 100 and 120 plus a 40% commission. How close can we get to that, right? So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at. On the opposite side, tell me again the question that you had from the...
Yeah, absolutely. So
is it internal?
Internal, right? So I have been with the company, let's just say 4 years, 5 years, whatever the number. We'll pick any arbitrary number. I have performed well. I have hit commission. I've hit quota. I've made great commission. However, I now have a value to a company that probably deserves a few more dollars to be paid. How do I negotiate that? How do I go to my upper management, my leaders, and say, hey, I have a $90,000 salary. Honestly, at this point, my value, I should be bringing in 110, 120, 115, 100, whatever the number may be. And typically, I have found that those conversations start when other companies start trying to recruit, saying, hey, you did such a great job for XYZ company. Here, I'm gonna give you a little bit more money. Come to, ABC company. We're gonna pay more. How do you have those? How do you start those discussions? How do you negotiate? How do you bring that up to sales leadership, to sales management, to HR folks, et cetera?
Well, I love how you put it, because this is exactly what I coach my clients to do, is really talk about your value, right? Come with a list of, of your achievements, how you've impacted the organization. Again, it's like a great sales, right? Sales conversation that you're having. It's really not about you, I want more money. It's about them understanding your value, right? And by starting with, here's the impact that I've had, here are the new clients that I brought in from the last 3 years. I love this company. I feel like it can do even more, and I'm targeting, 110, whatever it is, and this is also a great place to bring in that little phrase, based on my research, jobs like this are paid between X and Y in the marketplace. I'm targeting Z. How close can we get to that? Right. So again, I'm not going to be telling you anything new from a sales perspective, but I think it's so hard to get a little emotional distance when we're asking for more money, especially of the people who've been paying us in the past.
I would absolutely agree with that emotional distance you just mentioned, because when you're negotiating to get more money, typically, it's a me problem, not a you problem, right? This is something that's affecting me. And so because this is something that's impacting my personal life, it's very easy for me to get emotional, start to think that this is all lights shining on me. I should be getting this. I should be getting this. But what you said prior to that, bringing a list of achievements, it seems simple to say, but I have been on opposites. I've been on both sides. I've been on the side where someone comes to me asking for more money, and it's very, here's what I have done. Here's my impact. And while I can acknowledge and agree, I can't take your theory to the compensation committee. I can't take your theory to the CEO, because I can't say, hey, Kate did this, this, and this. She really helped negotiate this deal. These are all theories. But when you bring out a list of achievements, and as a sales professional, it's typically easy to quantify your impact to a company, and you say, here's what I have done thus far. I would like to get closer to this metric. How can we meet in the middle? So I think that is really, really good insight on listing your achievements, emotionally disconnecting, because at the end, you said it earlier, it's a sale. It is 100% a sales conversation. And even though I would say majority of the audience is sales professionals, doesn't mean we're always good at selling things that are emotionally invested to us. Yep. So I like that. So if you're bringing this to, you're bringing this negotiation, is there a strategy for making it happen? Meaning, is there a, hey, I bring this up, if it happens, great. Or do you coach clients, say, hey, you know what? If I don't get this, I'm going to leave. It's almost like that threatening demand. Like, if I don't get this, I'm going to leave. Is that something that is being taught? Is that something people come up with? And if so, how effective or ineffective is that strategy?
I think it's a great question, because I think people are right now into that kind of, do this for me or I'm going to walk kind of a situation. And that puts that threat emotion into the person you're negotiating with. And what I found with salary negotiations, yes, it's a sale, but it's a collaborative sale, right? So I'm going to get more if I convince the hiring manager or the recruiter that I can be of value and service to them, and that I am a great collaborator, I'm a team player, and all that kind of stuff. So I love the collaborative concept here, and you can be collaborative and still be firm, because I will do a little wordsmithing of something that you said. How can we meet in the middle? Even though that may be the emotion that you want to bring, I would encourage people to say, set out a target that you want. I'm targeting 110, 120. How close can we get to that? Right? So you're not saying, well, I'm at 100 and I wanted to get to 110. Let's meet in the middle. Okay, that's going to be 105. That's a 5% increase. That's awesome. That good for you. And just from a psychological perspective, when you're anchoring them to that 110 to 120, that is a psychological, it's not really a mind game, but you're tying them to a bigger number, right? Than let's meet in the middle, which is 105. So
I think that's great. And I will recall my phrase, because I think your phrase is way better. So if you didn't hear that, Catapulting Commissions family, listen closely, right? So if you're saying, I want to get to $120,000 or $110,000 and you're currently at 100, I had just said, hey, how do we meet in the middle? Bad strategy. Kate said, how close can we get to 110? Is that kind of perfect? So that is something.
You may only get 105 out of that, but again, you're probably going to get more than you would if you said meet in the middle.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I like that. You're going to shoot for the top, ask for that top. So in that salary negotiation, you're going to go ask for it. Is it ever appropriate to ask for more compensation dollars, more variable, let me rephrase that, more variable compensation dollars? So, there's comp plans that, I have found in my own research and my own experience, the higher paying compensation sales jobs that are paying $200,000 and above, $300,000 and above, you're finding sales professionals, they're not having $200,000 salaries, right? They're having $80,000, $100,000, $60,000, $120,000, but they're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in variable comp. Some companies now are starting to limit that variable comp, saying, yes, you can make great money. I will give you an $80,000 salary, and I'm going to cap your income at $200,000. How do we negotiate if you're in that boat?
I think it's a challenge because that stuff tends to be more of a policy kind of thing. So, again, if you're in a big company, you may not have the opportunity to push against the policy as much as you would like, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for it, because you may be the fourth person who asked for it, and you're the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So ask for what you need and what you feel like you deserve, and see what happens. There's no harm in asking. There's only harm in being a jerk about it, And again, this collaboration, don't take it personally, and be firm but be nice. Those all will help you get more of what you want, and that's why you're a great salesperson, right? Because you have kind of that DNA in you. So my guess is that that salespeople are probably more effective at some of these things than a lot of my clients who've never understood any of the concepts of, really helping the person that you're negotiating with understand your value and all that kind of jazz.
What you're saying there about salespeople is so true, because a sales professional, you're paid on your ability to influence a decision-making process. People make decisions in sales for one of two reasons. One of those reasons is to avoid pain. If I can present my product in a manner that causes you, the buyer, to avoid pain, you're more likely to purchase my product. So if I'm in that salary negotiation, and I have had people who've done the collaborative, whether they've come to me and say, hey, will you support me in this? Here is my value to the company. If I leave, what's that pain? And I look and I'm like, man, for you to leave, the turnover is twice the amount, 10 times the amount of the raise that you're asking. Yes, Kate, I'm going to be in your corner. I'm going to also fight for you, because I know the pain for me to replace you is so great and so large. So I think that that's a really good point you mentioned, that in salary negotiation, it is a collaborative deal. You are selling, you're selling yourself, you're selling the value you bring. And for those of you listening right now, remember, people make decisions to purchase a product or service or a salary negotiation on the psychology of sales. And one of those fundamental principles is, can people avoid pain? And the other one is, can people enjoy pleasure? So if you can avoid pain and you can teach someone how to avoid pain, they will more likely join you on that decision-making process. Now, I want to switch gears here in a new conversation, not a new conversation, but a conversation that's actually taking place today. these startups that exist are growing exponentially. You're based in Oregon. I'm based in Southern California. Before we started recording, I made the joke, right? I have talent that I try to retain, but there's Silicon Valley, South Silicon Beach. You go further, you go into the world of Oracle, Nike. I mean, it's just, there's startup companies everywhere that are trying to attract and recruit talented sales professionals, people that have existing relationships in said industry, have a proven track record of success.
Yeah.
If I'm one of those people, and let's just say, I've been in medical sales for medical sales for 8 years, 8.5 years. Someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I have this new shiny medical device, and it looks great. It's fantastic. It's going to change the world. I want you to come work." And I look at you, I'm like, "Hey, you are on month 13 of operation." Yeah. I'm a little nervous. I have to be honest with you, right? There's, I don't want to knock my entrepreneurs down, but majority of the entrepreneurs that start, majority of the companies that start fail. So there is that risk. How do I negotiate? And let's say I am willing to take that risk. I do want to move to a startup because they are offering this such a shiny, attractive opportunity. What are some of the negotiating things that a person can make, request, or ask for when dealing with the startup, not dealing with these large conglomerate Fortune 500 companies that, to change comp plans is going to take 40 signatures. I want to, hey, you're a startup, you're 2 layers, 1 layer. Sometimes you are the CEO. What are some of those keys that we can negotiate for?
Well, I think the biggest opportunity is in equity. But you also have to remember that's the riskiest part. So, if the company winds up selling to another company, or they go IPO, which is pretty rare, of course, you could make some serious cash. But one of the things that I would really encourage your listeners to do too is make sure that they are not depending on that equity to make a living, because you won't be able to exercise the equity for a long time, right? And what the tendency is for startups, because I do a fair amount of consulting with them, is that it's like, we'll give you a ton of equity and we'll give you a very small salary. You need to make sure that you're getting a salary that is large enough to make an impact, and a commission structure that makes sense. And it's going to be tough because, when you're starting with a startup, they are not profitable yet. But they also need exceptional salespeople in order to get to that profitability. So again, I think this is a place where you can really express your value in a deep and meaningful way that people who are not sales professionals, they we all know we need you, but we don't always know why. So I think that's one of the things that you can do, but don't settle, for nothing, because that equity, while it could be spectacularly valuable, it could also be worth nothing too. So you have to protect yourself. And, again, one of my biggest things that I would advise people whenever they're negotiating their salary, with a new company especially, is make sure you understand what it is that you're being offered, right? What are the conditions? What happens to that equity if the company gets sold to another company? How is your commission capped, or is it? What happens if you have a windfall or a waterfall situation? Those are all really important things to know. And I think it's even more important at startups.
You hit the nail on the head. That equity is very attractive, and I know so that I have colleagues that recruit and work at startups, and they're very like, hey, I can give you this equity, I can give you this many shares as a sign-on bonus. And you look at the shares, you're like, hey, I'm gonna give you 30,000 shares as a sign-on bonus. I'm like, okay, yeah, vested in 4 years, and the stock price is $1, and let's say the stock doesn't do well, and the stock price is now 30 cents in 4 years. This isn't the sign-on bonus, but they sell the dream. Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
This 30,000 shares, it's $30,000 today, but it can be 3 million when we sell. And so people jump and go and get excited on that. And I had a guest a few episodes back. If you're listening, go back to the episode with Robert Gonzalez, and he talks about his experience working at Shoemaker, a high-end clothing company that was purchased a few years ago. As a startup, was the 11th employee, talks about the whole experience. I think there's some value in working in startups and learning to negotiate that. But when you are in a position where your salary, your compensation is your way of life, I think it's fair for us to say we have to look at the big picture before we leave and take that risk, because it is a risk to work for a startup. Now, they're fun, they're exciting, some work, some don't. But when you leave some of these safety nets, there is a risk. And, I'm not one to bash either side of the argument. I have a high tolerance for risk personally. So I know what I've been willing to risk in my life and what I haven't been. And whatever works for you is going to work great for you. So Kate, if someone finds themselves in a position where it's time for me to negotiate salary, or I think I need professional help. Maybe I've been working with the company. I don't know. I don't exactly know what a salary negotiation coach does, but hey, I need one. I want to do that. What does that process look like to start working with you?
Well, you drop me a note, and my email is on all over my website, or you can connect with me through LinkedIn, and let me know you're interested, and then we'll set up a clarity call to make sure that you know what you want and make sure that I can help you with what you're trying to do. And then we'll see if it makes sense for us to work together. And that's how that works. It's pretty simple.
Fantastic, Kate. I really appreciate you keeping it simple, right? We talk about things being simple and working simpler effectively, not making things more difficult. So you definitely kept that simple for us. Now, as we're concluding our two-part show here, for those of you that are just joining or have just listened to this episode, be sure to tune into the previous episode with Kate DIxon as we talk about compensation from a company standpoint, building an entire structure. Kate, what is your website? What's the best social media for people to find you? And just a side note, if you're listening to the show or watching the YouTube video or anything, these links will be in the notes or the sections below.
So my website is katedixon.org. It's KATEDIXON, and that's my website. And then LinkedIn, I'm Kate DIxon Coach. So pretty easy to find me. And if you Google salary negotiation coach, I'm one of the only entries that'll come up for you. So
perfect. I appreciate that. And up until recently, Kate, I didn't know a salary negotiation coach existed, but I can tell you this: there is a demand and a need for your services. Catapulting Commissions family, we talk week in, week out, how to grow your business, how to generate higher revenue, how to make more commissions. One of the most strategic, fundamental ways to do so is in a compensation negotiation. That is ground one. Kate DIxon's with us today. She'll help you walk through that. Be sure to check her out at katedixon.org. Again, I am Anthony Garcia. Thank you for joining us on the Catapulting Commission Show. Kate, we love your presence. We love the energy you share with us. We look forward to seeing you back on the show again a couple years down the road and see what has changed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, Catapulting Commissions family, I will see you next time.